BMW has released the M4 CSL, and take a listen to this. It sounds pretty good. Let's go over some of the spec and tech before jumping into what's really important here, the design, because there's a lot to talk about here. I'm going to compare it to the regular M4 in a front, side, and of course the rear view, and zoom in on a specific detail of this car that I think is just incredible. So let's talk about some of the spec and tech. It has 443 horsepower and 479 pound-feet of torque. 0 to 60, 3.6 seconds, 191 miles per hour, limited top speed. It's the fastest production BMW around the ring ever, and it's priced at $141,000. Only 1,000 units will ever be made. So if you want one, I guess you gotta put in your order pretty soon. But here we have the regular M4 up top, and this is an interesting design. I don't know if BMW is starting to create cool designs again here. It kind of feels like it with the facelift, the 3 Series, which I think is a huge improvement of the previous one. And I think the more complex graphics here in the M4 CSL works better with the otherwise overall graphics of the regular M4. Up here, what I thought about this M4 when it first came out is that I think these headlights, the roundness and the shape of this clashes with all the other graphics in the front end that are very, very static and sharp, but the headlights are smooth. Kind of similar problem that we have in the new Mercedes SL as well. Looking at the headlights of that and the rest of the front graphics clash a little bit. And here we have these big, of course, kidneys in the front end, or I don't know if you can call them kidneys, pretty much teeth or something in the front end these days. But honestly, this design has actually grown on me, specifically on the M3. I think the M3 works a lot better because we have a sharp shoulder line in M3 going from the rear to the front end, which I think it ties together the design and the graphics of that car. But here in the M4, we have one shoulder line here, and then it kind of breaks up and goes in here, and then we have a smooth shoulder in the rear end. So it feels like it has its collarbone broken or something, looking at it from a side view, which we're gonna do in just a second. Talking more about that later. Let's focus on the front end here and these graphics. So looking at the CSL down here, it got a lot more complex, as you can see, a lot more things added in the design. But I think, honestly, usually I'm not a fan of adding more things to a design, but in this case, I kind of think that it works. We have a different front splitter right here compared to the regular M4. As you can see down here, it feels like it was designed with a purpose, and it obviously was, since it is the fastest BMW ever around the track. And then we have the same kind of headlights that we have in the normal M4, but look at the grille here. There's so much going on in the grille, new features in here that kind of makes it a much more complex design. And in addition to that, we have them in the lower part as well, and in these intakes. These intakes now have a new fin in it, which you can see right here, a carbon fiber wing that adds even more complexity to the design. And I think it works because overall the BMW M4 is a pretty complex design, and adding these things, it kind of ties everything together in a better way. If you're gonna have a complex design like we have in the front end right here, I think you should have that all over the car, and not just in the front end but also in the sides. The side isn't really changed yet, as you can see right here looking at the top M4 regular and the CSL down here. We do have one big change that we can see here in the side view. That is obviously this beautiful ducktail that from a straight rear view, which is the next view, doesn't have the same kind of flow to the design if you look at it from a 3/4 rear view like the normal M4. But at the same time, that lack of flow, in my opinion, shows that this is a track car, and it went more for functionality over styling, if that makes sense. But here we can see these shoulder lines. We have this shoulder right here, and then we have that being broken into this line, and then it comes back up top, and the same line that we have in the original back here. So it's kind of levels of the shoulder line. And looking at the M3, that's why I prefer the M3, because it has one sharp shoulder going from one end to the other. And you can see it, I think, more clearly in this beautiful satin blue or whatever color this is. It looks really cool. You do see the black graphics up top here on the hood. I think the hood itself is a different hood because these things, I think they stick down in a different way than they do up here. Yes, you can see that this is a lot narrower here at the bottom than it is on the regular M4. You can kind of see some of that looking at this car from a side view. It's a cool looking design, like the M4 and the M3. I have to give it to BMW. It's actually grown on me a lot since I first saw them. That's that initial shock that I think everybody had when they saw the M4 and the M3 come out. So now this is where it gets super cool and interesting looking at it from a 3/4 rear view. One graphic feature that you can clearly see right here that is totally different from the regular M4 is the taillight. When I saw this taillight, first of all, in the regular M4, I thought it was a really clean looking design. The height of the taillight is very narrow and it's stretched out horizontally, and you have this nice thick LED in here, which I love when they have thick LEDs like this on the taillights. It just looks really cool. And I think the rear view overall in the M4 just works a lot better because it's not as complicated as the front view, and it looks a lot more cleaner right here in the rear end of the M4. And if the front end were clean as this as well, I wouldn't have any problems with the side being this clean as well. But now it feels like the front end of the M4 super complicated, and then it gets very smooth in the side and also smooth in the rear. So they don't really connect styling wise with each other, these three views. But now going into the M4 CSL, this is what I'm talking about. Have a look at this ducktail here that we have. That normally you have a nice transition in the normal M4. It looks super clean. You can sketch it with one line like this, but you can't sketch it with one line in the M4 CSL. And that is because they added an additional piece. This is a totally different rear trunk for the M4 CSL. Makes it higher in the rear end, and I also love this logo that kind of reminds me of the 70s CSL BMWs when they had like a chrome ring around it and made it a little bigger, the logo, and added some more stuff to it around the logo. I think this is a cool modern interpretation of that type of logo. But the big change, as you can see, is of course the taillight. Just have a look at this. What's going on here? This is so cool. I really love the treatment of this taillight, and I don't think I've seen anything like this before. You have these tiny LEDs going in here, which kind of makes me wonder. I know there is a regulation that when the taillight is lit up, it needs to lit up a certain percentage of surfacing within the housing of the taillight. I don't know how they got around this here, because these are so thin that they don't really light up a lot. They probably are super strong when they're lit up because they kind of have to be in order to meet those regulations. But I think it's weird. BMW are doing weird things these days. Look at the new X3, for example. Those taillights look to me absolutely horrible because they have zero dynamic feeling to them. I did make a redesign of that on the Sketch Monkey channel, which you can go and check out. But here, this is like 20 years in the future and still retaining this cool dynamic feeling of a taillight, and it looks super futuristic, almost like a circuit board inside of this taillight, which I think it's really cool. And I really want to see this in real life and see, just go in and analyze all the little details inside of this taillight to really see what it's made up of. And sketching this taillight, as you can see from the sketches, basically what they did, they just used one single brush like this and created the taillight graphics. They didn't even add any thickness to the taillight graphics like we have on the normal M4. Very cool design. I really like the treatment of this. I think this really sets also the M4 CSL apart more. They didn't take the same pieces that they have in the M4 and just applied it onto the CSL. They really redesigned the entire graphics of this car, and I think that's the way to go if you want to have a special 1000 unit M4 CSL, have that feel even more special than the normal CSL. Down here it looks pretty much the same, but the exhaust are different than the M4 CSL. They are a lot lighter to save weight, and you also have, let's see, what else do we have? We have the logo and this trunk spoiler or ducktail that's now integrated in the body, which I love about this. It reminds me of the E46 M3 CSL, probably my favorite CSL of all time. It's such a stunning design, that car. The proportions of the M3 CSL and this, in addition to this added graphics for the CSL M3, it just makes for a gorgeous design. So it's really interesting to see BMW, what they're doing these days, because you never know what they're gonna drop next. It could be something really awesome like this M4 CSL, or there can be something really weird like the iX or the new XM coming out. I think it's gonna look exactly like the concept. Let me know what you think about this M4 CSL. Do you think it's an improvement over the regular M4, or do you prefer the styling more toned down, dialed down, if you can call it that, of the normal M4? Let me know in comments below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.